and welcome to Mount Podcast, the podcast for everything Mount Prospect. We're joined today by Mike Zadel, longtime resident, trustee, man about town. So, Mike, you've lived in Mount Prospect for most of your life, if not all of your life.
That's true. My family moved here from Chicago in 1950. I was 3.5 years old.
Okay, so we'll forgive you the first 3 years in Chicago.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I like to say that I kind of grew up with the town, but the town was doing quite well before we got here.
Okay. So what was the town like in the 50s when you were growing up?
I would say it was much more open. There were a lot of prairies that were still here, actually empty lots, but they had prairie grass growing in them. I remember as a kid, we would go to the corner lot and kind of stomp it down and create a little baseball field out of it, and that's where we played baseball. I lived on North Pine Street in the 300 block of North Pine.
Okay.
And east of me was Willie Street, and then Main, which is Route 83. I can recall in those days sitting on our front porch and actually watching the traffic go by on Route 83. That's how few houses they were. They were interspersed. Uh-huh. The lots were there. The streets were laid out, but there just wasn't a lot of houses back in those days when I was very young.
So a lot of the housing that was kind of popping up, that was post-World War II housing. What kind of houses were being built during that time?
Well, it kind of depended on the neighborhood. To the north and to the east, there was the Blewett subdivision, and those were small ranch homes. Most of them were put on a concrete slab. In my neighborhood, most of the homes were Cape Cod style homes, and ours had a full basement. I think you had options in those days. I was too young to get involved in the negotiations that my folks had, but that's kind of what was being built. Kind of a fun story, if I might.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
I remember my mother telling me the tale of how they managed to not only make the decision to buy the house, but how they held the house down. At the corner of Isabella and Route 83 was a little stand, so to speak, and that's where the builder/realtor had his sales office. And so they stopped by, they looked at the different homes, and they found the one that they wanted, made a decision to buy it. And the guy asked if they could put something down as kind of earnest money to hold the house until they went through the process. And my dad looked at my mom and shrugged his shoulders, and she said, "Well, I've got our grocery money for the week, Charlie." And he said, so she turned to the realtor and said, "Will $5 do?" And she held the house for $5.
Wow. That's certainly a different time period.
Absolutely.
So in the 50s, there was, the baby boom. Were there a lot of kids in the neighborhood when you were growing up?
Very much so, yes. There, every house on my block was a younger family, starting their homes, starting their life. My dad moved there because of the train, or moved here because of the train could take him within walking distance of his work. He worked at the Procter & Gamble factory at North Avenue and the Chicago River.
Okay.
So he could take the train downtown. And it worked for him. He didn't need to commute. So, and a lot of people, I remember in our neighborhood and elsewhere, that's the whole reason that they came out this way. That, and it was a growing community, a young community. Like I said, there were a lot of families, almost every single home. And the Park District was being built. The Lions Club had donated the land for Lions Park. The first swimming pool was built I think I was maybe 7 years old when the first Lions Park pool came along. So there were a lot of things for kids to do. And, it was more open spaces than certainly it is now. I mean, there's good green space here, but it was a lot more open when I was younger.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, it was. I love the story of the empty lot and being trampled down to make a baseball diamond. Were there many parks? And I know the park district was just getting started, but were there a lack of parks? Is that why you did it, or was it just close by?
It was just close by, and there were enough of us that were interested in playing that it was just something that you did. You kind of took over somebody's next door lot and just did it. There, like I said, I think Lions Park was the main one.
Mm-hmm.
And once I learned how to ride a bike, I spent a lot of time there. I don't really recall any of the other ones. The schools always had a large, green area surrounding them. So we played there. Emerson Park was another one where we would go and play. And then once the Little League was established, the baseball, I remember playing baseball at Owens Park. The park district actually built ball diamonds so you could formally go and learn the game and play the game. It was just little pickup games in the neighborhood.
Okay.
We just stomped down a local open empty lot.
So where did you go to elementary school?
I went to pretty much all of them. I actually started kindergarten at Central School, which is currently the library.
Right.
Then from there, I'm going to say I went to Fairview for first and second grade.
Mm-hmm.
Then the boundaries changed, and I went to the Bussey School, which is now a park in the area of Bussey and Thayer Street.
Okay.
I was there for a while. Then I was back to Fairview School again, and then ultimately ended up doing junior high at Central School.
Okay. And you went to, for high school, you went to
Prospect.
Prospect?
Yes.
Okay.
As we walked, interestingly enough. I always chide my grandchildren about having to walk uphill both ways to school in the wintertime, and when they complain about taking the bus. So
yeah, that was probably a pretty good hike each way.
yeah, it was less than a mile, but it was
okay.
And a bunch of us walked together, so it seemed like it was no time.
Okay. So you graduated high school. Do you want to say, is there anything you want to say about what it was like at Prospect High School then?
It was interesting because I recall as a youngster under 10 going to the site where Prospect High School stands now, and there was a white sand pond. We used to catch tadpoles there. Then ultimately, when Arlington got really overcrowded, the first school District 14 built as an expansion was Prospect.
Okay.
My brother was part of the first graduating class there, and I would have been, my brother was class of 61, I was class of 65. And it was an excellent school. They had things that were, at the time, very modern. Not many of the schools had a full theater. Prospect had that. They had the field house. The floor was kind of dirt floor, so it wasn't really used for a lot. They hadn't put the basketball court in there yet, or all the full bleachers, but they did use it for track. They used it to train for football, for baseball. So the field house was a plus. That was something that wasn't real popular around here at the time. They also had the full football field that was out there, so they had plenty of land. They had a big expanse of land in order to put in the sports facilities and give us an opportunity to do well with that. So yeah, the coaching staff, the teaching staff there were just top notch, like they are today, and they were considered to be one of the best around. The District 214 managed to attract a lot of excellent young talent to the school. So I felt very fortunate to have been able to attend there. And the same thing is true of the elementary schools. The whole Mount Prospect educational system was very, very good, very well known for its quality.
That was one of the most attractive features for a lot of people coming out to Mount Prospect in the 50s, 60s, 70s.
I think it was. I think it is still today, actually.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So
yeah. So after high school, what did you do?
a variety of things. I was able to go to the University of Michigan. I was a gymnast, and that helped me to get in there. And I spent a few years there, and then I transferred to Southern Illinois University later on. Then it was during the Vietnam era, so the U.S. Army kind of intervened.
Yes.
And through a series of events, if you recall, there was a lottery or conscription in those days, or the draft. And my number was 99. I wasn't quite finished with college yet, but I was on my last-ditch educational deferment when I decided to come back to Mount Prospect. And I was married at the time to my first wife, and I decided to come back and kind of wait it out and see what would happen through a series of events with Richard Nixon getting elected, and then halting the draft and getting into all the negotiations for withdrawal from Vietnam. I wound up not ever getting drafted, so I did not go into the service.
Your number never came up.
My number never came. Well, actually, it did at one time, and I went for a physical, and I thought that I was going to be drafted quickly. But Nixon suspended the draft. During that period of time, I turned 26, so I became too old to do that.
Okay.
Or not too old to be drafted, or older than the desired.
Right.
And so I didn't, I wound up not actually going into the service. So for a while I worked for District 214 with the idea of continuing my education, and I wanted to become a teacher at that point, teacher and a coach. And I actually did some coaching. At Prospect, I worked with the swimming team.
Okay.
And Elk Grove was looking for an assistant gymnastics coach. So I was kind of a paraprofessional. I worked in study halls and monitored that. And then as an aside, I was able to coach too, because I was eligible for that. So I coached gymnastics at Elk Grove High School with Fred Gaines, who was one of the assistant coaches when I was in high school.
Okay, yeah.
And so that was kind of fun.
Well, you kind of glossed over your gymnastics career. Men's gymnastics in the 60s. What was the state back then?
It was very different than it is today. All around was, we had one all-around competitor, but the emphasis wasn't as much on the all-around as it was on individual pieces of equipment.
Okay.
And my specialty was a trampoline, but I did a little bit of tumbling as well. And ultimately, when I got to Michigan, tumbling turned into free exercise. So I did a minimal amount of that as well. But the trampoline was really where I was, what I specialized in.
And the most dangerous of all events.
Well, that's what they want to say. But I'll tell you what, that high bar, you slip off of the high bar at the speed that you're going when you're doing giants or eagles, things of that nature, and you can severely hurt yourself. So, but it was an interesting time, and Prospect had a good team. So did Arlington, and they were our arch rivals, as they were pretty much in all sports. Back then, it was a winter sport, so we competed with basketball players and people like that for audiences. But it was usually at different times. And Prospect had a good team. Rick Ferris was our head coach. And we did well. We had won a couple of conference championships. I was fortunate enough to finish kind of in the top three and got to stand on a box a couple of times. Not so lucky in the state when I finished top 10 in the state, but kind of missed my routine in the state finals and ended up in 10th place. But still, it was a good experience all around. And like I said, it helped me get into the University of Michigan, who also had an excellent gymnastics team back in those days. But again, the big difference was the emphasis was not on the all-around competition. It was individuals competing for top prize on their specialty.
Okay. So you avoided the draft, and
didn't really avoid it.
Well,
it didn't get to me.
You didn't. Well, you avoided going into the service, not deliberately. Exactly. You happenstance was in your favor, and you didn't end up getting called to serve. You were doing some coaching, some teaching, and then what?
Well, then I had an opportunity to buy a tavern. Actually, it was the VFW Hall, which today is the Moose Lodge at the corner of Highland and 83.
Uh-huh.
And in those days, originally it was all run by the vets. But as they aged, they kind of got tired of it, so they would lease the business, the bar business, and then there's a hall associated with that. And they leased that to an individual who ran the business end of it, with financial arrangements with the VFW. And then also, if there were small bookings, because the hall wasn't that big, but if there were small bookings, the manager would assure that there was bartending service for that. Food was usually catered out. So he was going to retire and move to Florida. And he offered me to buy him out over time as business allowed. And it was a good opportunity for me, I thought. I started working there part-time while I was teaching at Prospect or working at Prospect. And I really enjoyed the business. I enjoyed the customers. It was very busy time. And the people were good, and I could make a living there. And so that's what I did for maybe 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And then I don't want to say the relationship with the VFW folks became contentious, because it wasn't really contentious, but the business had been building up, and so we needed to negotiate a new arrangement, and it just didn't work for me. I couldn't find a good way to make it work and still achieve, with the amount of work that I was doing, and still achieve the income. So I left there, and I actually went to work, applied at Public Works here in Mount Prospect. And that was in 1974.
Okay, yes.
And they were hiring, and I got hired on by the Public Works director at the time was Dave Craver, and his assistant was Herb Weeks, who ultimately became Public Works director, and the Public Works building is now dedicated and named after Herb Weeks. He was quite a character here in Mount Prospect. So that's how I got into Public Works. That's kind of my brief history.
What did you start doing for Public Works?
The first day I was there, I dusted chairs and pretty much anything that came along. I really kind of enjoyed the work, so I tried to work with as many different crews as I could. So within the first 2 or 3 years that I was there, I spent time with the water department, the streets department, buildings and grounds, our forestry division. I did a little bit of everything. They weren't as formally distinct in those days as they are now. So you pretty much got cross-trained to do everything, because we didn't have a real large crew. But once the northern section of town, north of Randhurst there and west, was annexed, a lot more work came our way, especially in forestry and in the street division, because we took all that effort over. So we started to expand. But I worked a little bit of everything, and then when I became foreman, I was lucky enough to get an elevated position of foreman. I started out mostly in forestry, and I worked mostly in forestry in that capacity. But because we were cross-trained during the wintertime, water main breaks, anything that came along, you were in charge of, and you went out and you just did it. We get called out in the middle of the night, and 24 hours a day, Saturdays, Sundays, whenever an emergency rose. And it was very challenging, I thought. I rather enjoyed that kind of work quite a bit. So then there was a restructuring that came along, and Sandy was hired as our first forestry superintendent.
Sandy Clark.
Sandy Clark.
Yes.
Yeah. She was Sandy Forgus at that time, but yeah, she was hired. And then Herb did a restructure where he actually named superintendents, and that was the beginning of a more defined public works department. So there was a street superintendent, water superintendent and the forestry and grounds superintendent. So I worked for several years with Sandy and kind of refining and redoing what we were about in forestry and grounds maintenance. And I was looking at my options, and eventually I was fortunate enough to Schaumburg, the village of Schaumburg, was looking for a superintendent of maintenance who oversaw everything except the mechanics, the vehicle maintenance.
Okay.
And I applied there. I went through a assessment process, which was kind of grueling, as I recall, and was fortunate enough to be hired on in Schaumburg, and spent 6 years there.
Okay. And after Schaumburg,
Well, once again, I kind of, I would do as many things as I could on a regional basis. So I was part of the American Public Works Association, the Chicago chapter suburban branch. And as a superintendent, I had more opportunity to attend meetings and find out what that was all about. So it helped me understand the value and the importance of the Public Works Department much more clearly than just working there. So I really learned a lot and tried to pay close attention. So I became involved in that. And through various associations, I met the superintendent of maintenance at the Illinois Tollway. And as luck would have it, he was doing a restructure at that time. This is right around 1990 now. He was doing a restructure of his entire maintenance division, which was a part of the engineering department at the Tollway. And he was looking for a roadway maintenance manager. And it was very attractive to me, and I was hoping that I could, go through the process and get that job, because unlike a municipality where you have one public works department, there were 13 maintenance garages located across the entire tollway system. It was like having 13 little public works departments. They were all populated with, the rural areas had probably 24 or 26 staff members, but the metropolitan area, those were 35, 40 people per location. So it was a much broader scope of work, and very, very interesting. The whole field of transportation and engineering always fascinated me. And so this was an opportunity to expand my horizons even further, and I was fortunate enough again to go through the process and be hired on as the roadway maintenance manager for the Illinois Tollway. And I stayed there for 23 years, and that's where I retired from. And here I am.
Here you are. But that's your professional career, but you also had a lot of involvement in Mount Prospect in a non-professional way as well, in that you started serving the community in various ways. I know you're a Lion.
Correct.
What?
Prospect Lions.
Yes. When did you start working with the Lions?
Well, actually, I joined the Lions Club, I want to say around 2010, 2007, okay. 2010, somewhere around there. I was already interested in the community, in trying to serve the community in various ways. Lions Club was an excellent way to do it. I had met several Lions through various associations, and I was able to help them out on different things. And finally, somebody invited me to join, and so I did. And then we were doing some particularly busy projects at the Tollway, and I left the Lions for a little while because I just couldn't do the things that I wanted to do in order to better serve the community. So I left for a couple of years, but then when things settled down again, I joined back up again with it. But that was after actually I was elected. So
okay,
and I joined the Lions Club.
All right.
I always was interested in the village politics, even back in my public works days. I kind of followed what was going on in the community. And
so how did you get started in politics in Mount Prospect?
Like I said, I'd always followed it. I was always interested
Right.
in what was going on, and determined that maybe I had a voice. I had some things to bring, some outlooks and some talents, if you will, that might be beneficial to the community. So after a couple of years of saying, well, I'm going to run one of these days, I finally determined that I would do that. That was back in 1999. And I put together some little local neighborhood people, and they helped me out by passing out petitions and doing all the things that you need to do. It was very low key. And there were 5 people at that time running for 3 spots on the village board. I did not win, but I did very well. And so it was very encouraging. I also got to know a lot of the players that I hadn't had cross paths with. So a lot of the community leaders, obviously we would meet one another at various forums and things of that nature. I think there were more opportunities in those days. They did things like coffee socials and stuff like that that you don't see as much today during the election period. So I got to sit down one-on-one with these folks, and it gave me some pretty good cross connections. And I was asked by Skip Farley, Mayor Farley, if I would be interested in serving on a commission. And they had an opening at that time on what was then the Plan Commission, which has now been combined with the Planning and Zoning.
Right.
Planning and Zoning. And so I said, yes, I really would like to do that. So I got involved that way first, and tried to do my homework and bring things to the table that were pertinent. And again, as luck would have it, the chairman of that commission got another assignment and chose to resign or retire from the commission, and the other members suggested that I become the chairman, and so I became chairman of the Planning Commission. And then 2 years later, I ran again for trustee, and that time then I won. So that was in 2001.
Yes. So the loss didn't sour you on politics?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, I think it probably made me a bit more determined to change my approach. And once I met leadership and got more deeply involved and saw the how it works, the policy and the oversight of the board, and providing staff with challenges to better run the community, the more excited I became to try and run again. And it opened my eyes. There was so much more of a cooperative or an effort to come to consensus than I really thought had been going on. And I really liked that notion. And so it kind of fit what I thought should be happening. And I was very, very encouraged, even by losing. Like I said, I didn't lose by much, and there were 5 people running for 3 spots. So I was, there might have been 6. Anyway, it was encouraging for me, and I just tried to do my homework and do the best I could on the Plan Commission, and then ultimately I got on the board, where I stayed for 20 years.
That's right. And they and you got out, and they dragged you back.
Yeah, there's a video clip that was sent to me by a friend who says, I keep trying to get out, and they keep dragging me back in. It was from one of the
Godfather 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit for the people who don't know. You had retired as a trustee, and when Arlene's term was up and your term was up, you decided not to run again. And there was a vacancy, short term, on the board. And what happened?
Yeah, there was a vacancy, a newly elected trustee, through a series of personal events, needed to move out of town, or was planning to move out of town. And some notice was given, so the mayor was aware of this, and he called and he said, I hate to ask you this, maybe I should talk to your wife first, but, he explained what was going on. And he asked if I would come back in the interest of, a lot of good things are happening in the community. And it's difficult for a nominee or a person who's never served before to come into that situation, or any situation on the village board, because there is a learning curve, and kind of pick up the pace and keep up pace with what's been going on. So since I had only been gone for a year, he called and asked if I would come back, and he did formally ask Carolyn, and my wife Carolyn. And of course she agreed right away, and so I agreed to do it because it was short term. We weren't going anywhere to speak of instantaneously, and there were some unfulfilled things that were going on when I retired, and I was able to have a hand in some of those again. And so it wasn't all unselfish act on my part. I enjoyed coming back, and I agreed with the mayor. It is very helpful for the community to have somebody who's got the experience, or who's been through some of the processes that were going on, and could make decisions based on experience and knowledge of what was going on. So I enthusiastically came back, but I'm also enthusiastically looking forward to retiring a week from today, I believe. Yeah, I think my last meeting will be the first meeting in May.
In May, yes. Let's talk a little bit about that learning curve. I've worked for the village for 25 years now, and I've seen people come and go, and there definitely is a learning curve. What do you think is the hardest thing, or the most important thing that you had to learn as a new trustee, or not so new trustee?
I don't think it was the hardest thing to learn, but the most important thing was how to listen. Not just listening and having things go in one side and on the other, but listening closely for points of view and for the opinion, the general opinion of the community as to what direction they wanted to go. That was the hardest thing to learn, was listening correctly. There's a difference between just listening to what the folks are saying and then trying to capture the things that are important, and it takes time. One of the criticisms, constructive criticisms that I heard when I first got on the board was that I don't talk enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's better than talking too much. But and I think it's important for a lot of trustees to just listen and get a feel for what's going on and what your role is. There is a strong learning curve in that. It actually, once you're introduced to the subjects and the matters that come before the board, you have to kind of discern and prioritize and figure out what the important things are. You have to talk to people in the community and find out what they're thinking about different things. And the community will come to you and express their opinions of different things. And you really have to focus on sorting out what is personal opinion versus what's best for the community. And I always tried to do that in my decision making and in my thought about especially the tough things that come before the village board. Most of the stuff is actually routine, but there are issues and decisions that need to be made that can have an impact for 20, 30 years during your time in office and after you leave office. And those things require careful consideration and a wide view of what's best for the community. So takes time to understand what those important issues are and how to best represent the people who have elected you to conduct their day-to-day business. So I think that a 2-year learning curve would be, I would think, average. Some people pick it up a lot quicker. But in order to really, really be comfortable with the decision-making process, especially once we started doing these strategic planning sessions, it takes a while, and you need some experience. You need some experience in order to express a solid opinion about why you're supporting or not supporting various issues. So there is definitely a learning curve there, and if new trustees don't talk a lot, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's not. What would you suggest for people who are looking to get involved in the community, either in politics or just in general? What are good ways for them to get their feet wet, so to speak?
Well, the service organizations that are within the community, I think, are a good place to explore to start with. I know we as the Lions Club have never done a lot of outreach, but we're trying to change that now because what we found was we're getting older. It's more difficult to do things like the annual festival. And we need to refresh and to bring in younger thought and younger people to not only just do the work, but, the world around us has changed significantly as we age, and we need people who understand that and can deal with it. So I think service organizations are a really good way to start. Also, if you're interested in what's going on in the community, attending board meetings or watching them on TV is a good way to educate yourself as to what's going on. Our village website, if you really want to understand some of the workings of the village and how staff is coordinated and what our departments are, where your money is being spent, the village website is a terrific source for that. And talk to your elected officials. Ask them, how they got involved and what experience they felt was necessary in order to run for office. Again, I would love to see some younger people express an interest in civics, which kind of has fallen by the wayside over the years. Or I shouldn't say fallen by the wayside, but not become a priority for a lot of people. And in order for the municipality to succeed, their people need to be involved, if not directly serving in one manner or another, at least discussing things that are important to them. As opposed, social media is an interesting view of what's going on in the community. However, people in social media tend to gravitate to people with their own opinion, with the same opinion. It's just human nature. So that they want to talk to people who have the same outlook that they do. It would be better if they talk to their elected officials to find out what their actual thoughts are, what's going on, how they could get involved, how they could serve. The boards and commissions are an excellent way to do that. I know there's been many discussions about how we can open that up and be more, get more people involved. But to me, those are advisory groups. They're very vital to our village board. And to me, I think that's always been the mayor's purview. It's kind of like a president who sets up his own cabinet. The mayor needs the prerogative to be able to choose people who he believes are community minded and forward looking and not necessarily of the same opinion that he or she has, but that's where the nominations ought to come from. And then the board can discuss, look at qualifications and discuss and determine who gets named to those commissions.
Yeah. You touched on social media. I as director of communications here at the village, I see a lot of social media. And one thing that a lot of people claim about Mount Prospect and about our board in general is that a lot of times, it's not worth showing up to a board meeting. It's already a done deal. They've already made their decisions without us. Our input is meaningless. What do you say to people who claim that?
Come when the issue begins, and become a part of the discussion. A lot of times, I don't know why people feel that way. I really don't. I can tell you from firsthand experience that, again, by listening to what people are saying, I have changed my views on certain issues that have come before the board. I try to keep an open mind as much as I can, and I've changed my views based on opinions that I've heard at a board meeting. Usually, the major issues are discussed at a committee of the whole meeting where no decision is made, and that's where people should come and get involved. The best example I can tell you about is the budget. We don't often hear from anybody during budget discussions, which start usually in late August, early September for us. I mean, when we're starting to make decisions. For staff, just about the time you button up one budget, you're starting on the next one. And I understand that, but they're not brought. Then we do our quarterly reviews, so there's a review process. That's where you should get involved if you're concerned about how we're spending your money. Also, when we start the budgeting process, when we talk about our community improvement programs, the capital programs, the capital funding, and the general budget, that's an important time to get input from the people, because the most visited meetings that we have are the 2 meetings prior to passing the budget. The first one is the first reading of all the things, the complexities that go into the budget. And then the second one is the second reading where we actually pass the budget. That's when we have more people there than ever. And then they come up with sometimes some really good ideas, but by then it's almost too late. The planning process has been done. And it's kind of a done deal by the time we get to that point. So my advice to the community would be, if you want to get involved in our budgeting process, please get involved early, because that's when the listening process takes place. That's when the decisions are being formulated. They've not been made yet. Very rarely do we, or I should speak probably for myself, but I've seen it with my colleagues on the board as well. Very rarely do we come to a COW meeting or a committee of the whole meeting where we're discussing an issue that will be brought before us for finalization. Very rarely do we come there with our minds made up already. We invite the public to participate. It's their issue too. So Please come and let us know.
Okay. Wrapping things up a little bit, what do you think is your greatest legacy? What do you think you're most proud of having achieved as a 20-plus year trustee?
I would say the redevelopment in the downtown. I think that my emphasis when I came here was we had such a kind of a fun community when I was a kid growing up. Our downtown area was relevant. It was important. We had grocery stores. We had meat markets. We had clothing stores, dry goods shops. And I know that a lot of those kind of concepts have passed us by, and I understand that. But I really wanted to see the downtown community relevant again. Back in 2001 and even in 1999, one of the things I would profess during my campaign was, that train runs both ways. It doesn't have to take people out of here and into Chicago. It can bring them out here as well if we can become a place, a location with relevancy. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of one of my biggest things that I wanted to focus on when I came on the board. And that was one of the realizations that kind of development takes years to accomplish. And I really, would credit Mike Cassidy and his staff, and even to some extent his predecessor and the staff that he built together, with coming up with some ideas and then bringing them to the next level and making them come to fruition. So I really like seeing the development that's going on in and around the downtown area. And I hope that it breeds more success, because if the downtown becomes vibrant and viable, it tends to reach out. We've had some wonderful corridors that could be good, viable commercial corridors. Northwest Highway is one, and of course the Big Red Road corridor is another one. But along Euclid and the South Mount Prospect, I think the South Mount Prospect is a real diamond in the rough. So I think there's a lot more things that could be done. My focus was on downtown, and I think we were successful with that, and that's one of the things that I'm quite proud of. This building was another thing. Consolidating everything in one building that was so disjointed prior to building a village hall, a meaningful village hall that was functional. So this building would be one of the things that I think I had a hand in that turned out well. And again, the redevelopment, but there's just been a whole host of things. The improvements in the storm sewers and storm relief, mitigation of flooding on the north side, phenomenal. I think the work that's being done now to enhance and develop the southbound Prospect corridor is taking off, and it's going to be huge, very, very, very successful. I really have seen a lot of coming together of various factions and ethnicities within the community. I love seeing that. One of my favorite things to go to is the community gathering that we have every year.
Celebration
of cultures. Yeah. I just enjoy talking to those folks and seeing the pride that they take in where they come from and in their own community, things that they do here. So it's been a great ride. It's been a really great ride, and if I've contributed to some of the success, well, that makes me very happy. But it's kind of a bonus. Just being able to serve has been really the most important thing to me.
Well, I want to thank you for spending some time with us. I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank Carolyn for letting you serve. I think that it's been a great time that in Mount Prospect history that during your tenure. So once again, thank you.
Well, it's certainly my pleasure, and I want to say that it really has been a privilege to serve in this capacity, and to have the support that I've had from the community. It made it a whole lot easier on me, but especially the support that I had from my wife and my family, who I've had to miss birthday parties and the usual things. And I'm not complaining about it. It's just part of the process. But everybody forgave me, and so I think that's really important. My family really supported me throughout all of this. The community supported me, and I'm ever so humble and grateful that I was able to do some of the things that I was able to do. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you for tuning in to Mount Podcast. Mount Podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts and every good place where you can download a podcast. See you next time.